Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today's episode, I have thoughts. What is culture now? My name is Glenn Gers. I am the Chief Operating Everything here at Writing for Screens, a channel devoted to trying to take some of the skills and tools and insights that I gained in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies, trying to leave some of that behind on my way out of the business because it was hard to learn it. And I feel like it might be good to share these things that I ran into in case they are helpful to you. It is not a solution. It is not a system. There is no answer. There is no order. It's just stuff I've figured out for myself, and I like sharing it. So what I've done is I've built this channel. Here's a screenshot of the main page. If you look down towards the bottom, you will see a series of playlists. The first three playlists: Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. That's a collection of about 50 10-ish minute videos. Each one I think of as sort of a little lesson on that topic. There is no order, as I said. You can just look at the thumbnails. They're nice, bright, big words that you can say, this one's about character, this one's about dialogue, this one's about genre. See what I have to say about it and see if it's helpful to you, because you have to figure out if it works for you. That is the main lesson of this whole channel. Every artist must make their own path. There is no right or wrong in art. There is what you want to do, what you're able to do, what the world will let you do, and trying to figure out how those things work together. Trying to figure out what it is you like, what it is you're trying to do, what you want to do, and then what's possible. What do you have the ability to do? What do you have the access to get into? So all of that stuff is stuff you have to figure out for yourself. No one can tell you. When people tell you there is some formula, there is some system, that is not true. If it was true, everyone would do it. And it would work, and it doesn't. So all I'm here to do is say, you have to figure it out for yourself. Try these things. These are some things I've heard other people try. Everybody has something of value to offer, but you've got to figure out, does it work for you? Is it productive for you? Is it helping you? So to that end, I have done these 50 videos, and then I do live streams. I do live streams every Wednesday, if I can make it, at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone. And that's what I'm doing every week. It's a different topic. This week's topic: what is culture now? Which really, it just sounds like a terrible PBS talk show. But I actually do have some thoughts about this that relate to being an artist, because that's the point. I'm not trying to solve anything for the global community. I'm trying to figure out, when you're an artist in a certain time, you have to deal with that time in your art. And our time is changing, and that's really the big secret. That's the big question. So before I get into this topic, I'm going to do some quick hellos. Hello, Sonia, 86. Hello, Donna Nelson and Jean F. from Ward number 6. Hi, Ming and Nathan and Michael, TT and Ricky. How are you? I feel like I'm doing the Christmas poem. On Donner and Blitzen. Hello, Pelicans 41. Hang on, Ming. That is an interesting question, which I was not actually going to get into because it's so controversial, but I'll try later. Hello, Thumper and Heartframes TV from Germany. Hello to TV. Heartframes TV. Hello to Germany. Okay. Hello, Kelsey. Nice to see you. Hey. Okay, so let's talk about this topic. What is culture now? The reason that it came up for me is there was an article in the New York Times magazine section. I'll try and put a link to it. It's I don't think it's necessarily the greatest article. I don't agree with a fair amount of it. For one thing, it trashes a bunch of shows that I think are pretty good. It was in October 7th, 2024, How Everyone Got Lost in Netflix's Endless Library by Willie Staley. Let me see if I can hold on. I'm gonna try getting a screen grab of that and then throwing it up here. Yeah, okay. So this was the title of this article, and so it just started me thinking. But I've been thinking about this a lot for various reasons at various times. But the big question is, essentially, as I see it, we are in an era in which technology has changed a lot of things. But for artists, the main thing is it has both made it possible to connect with anyone, anywhere in the world, which means your audience, your market, your culture, the world you're working in is no longer limited to what your technology could have gotten you to when you were, just trying to show a movie on a local theater or write for a local newspaper or whatever it is. So the main question that comes up now is what happens when culture is no longer defined to a time and a place, but is frankly most of the globe, most of the people on the planet. Well, have access to the same art space. And therefore, when you're trying to write something, who's judging it? Who are you writing for? Because every community has its own culture, has its own ways of looking at things, has its own traditions, has its own past artworks that it's referring to, has its own cultural situations. So as culture has become this thing that for a long time was simply local. Like if you lived in, France and it was the 14th century, it's not like you were getting a lot of news from Greece or Japan or even England. Truthfully, your culture was local. With the Industrial Revolution, that began to change. People began to conglomerate into bigger communities. And then with the invention of mass media, starting with the printing press especially, but then radio, movies, TV, all of that changed even larger. The concept of a mass audience changes the uses of culture, the power structure of culture. This may seem really abstract. Let me know if it is. But my point is, therefore, like if you are writing a novel in 19th century Paris, your concern is with the French publishers and the French literary community, who will have people who make the decisions for what gets published, what reaches, what is judged good or bad. And so you either have to steer into that, or you have to find some way to have an alternate path to distribution, because that's really what it's about. If you're an artist and you need a path to an audience. So what's happened just recently is going from mass culture, which was really the first, I think, big business, the first time that culture became big business. It was a fairly, it was an active business, when Shakespeare was doing his plays or when Dickens was writing his novels. But those things were not reaching as indiscriminately, as largely as they are now. And that's changing things. That is changing how we figure things out, because for a good amount of time, simply business values became artistic values. For most of the 20th century, certainly, and a good part of the 19th, the second half of the 19th century, there was bestsellers. There was the hit, the popular thing. The mass culture could be judged by number of tickets it sold, number of products, the amount of money it brought in. There was a separate high culture, which was dominated by a small elite of people who were either the people controlling those industries, the people who ran the opera house, the person who owned the magazine, and the small, powerful, fairly educated group that they were targeting and whose opinion they cared about. There wasn't as much of a monetary driver of that form of culture. There was more of a power plays within the cultural establishment. The cultural establishment broke down starting with paperback books, with radio, with movies. All of a sudden, there was simply so much money to be made from a mass audience that the distribution of movies, radio, paperback novels, things like that, was powered by its profits, not by its acceptance by the people who went to the opera in 1912 may not have paid any attention to vaudeville, but vaudeville became so big that it took over. There wasn't, people would be like, oh yeah, lovely, classical concerts, but not, but the judgment of the culture moved to what will please a large audience, or what do the people who are in the business of pleasing a large audience want it or feel it has to be. So that, for instance, silent film, when movies first started, they were pretty raunchy. They were pretty wide-ranging. There wasn't any real sense of where the lines were for what was proper in a movie in 1905, in 1910. What happened was silent films often got quite erotic, quite violent, and there was a crackdown in the late 1920s. Government in America threatened to come in and censor the movies. The movies quickly negotiated and said, okay, don't censor us, we will censor ourselves. And they created a sort of a board of self-censors, which they did. It was called the Hayes Office. And they made rules like you can never show a double bed. That's why so many movies, married couples have twin beds. Things like, or crime must always be punished. And so for a good portion of movie history, there was a business self-censoring in order to prevent the government from stepping in and stopping them from making movies. Anyway, the point about all this is that mass culture was the 20th century. Slowly but surely, high culture and mass culture became one. Art became popular. There was popular, famous museums. There were famous artists. People would put T-shirts and coffee mugs with famous paintings on them. Culture got all mixed up, and frankly, business took over culture. But what's happening now is a whole second layer of that, because the business model has changed with tech companies. Is any of this making sense to anybody? My point is that for instance, what Willie Staley in that article I was talking about said was, because you are being algorithmically targeted when you turn on a streaming service, there is no longer a central, like, there may be a top 10 things on Netflix at any given time, but the truth is a lot of people don't even know what's on Netflix unless Netflix is showing them, or they know to search for it. So that there's no longer just like a cultural organization choosing, this is going to be the year's big book. This is going to be the number one movie this year because they're going to put it into more theaters. Sometimes those flopped, but that was being decided by a company, by a set of companies. So therefore, if you wanted to be an artist in those arts, you had to know how those companies operated, what they were looking for. You had to play by their rules. The rules have changed because streaming services, to a great extent, will not release the information about what they are doing, what they want, what's being seen, what's not being seen. Furthermore, okay, thank you, Jean. Jean says she's getting it, so I'm making some sense. Let me do some quick hellos because a bunch of you have said hello since then. Hello, Max from the UK. Good evening to you. And Monica in Alabama. Good afternoon. Hey. Hey, Marta Toso. How you doing? Okay. And Anne Anka. Hello. Hello from Helene in France. Very good. That's okay, Hasko. It's all right if you missed the beginning. And narrative love. All right. So my point about this is that with the change, in other words, if we don't know what is popular, if we don't know what is valuable to the distribution companies, how do we as artists decide what we are going to do if we want to work in the business? And furthermore, how do you even understand what's going on around you? All artists work in response to the culture. They may go against it. The Impressionist painters, famously, there was an art establishment in France for 100 years or more called the Academy. And the Impressionist painters had a new style of painting that was radically different. The Academy refused to show them, so they set up their own show, and that began what we now know as modern art. So the point is that you can be in response to your culture by defying it, just going against it, but you're still responding to it. The problem now is because of the way that digital art is being released to us, the culture that I see when I open my streaming services is different than the one you see. Even if you live next door to me, it's not localized. It has to do with the algorithm deciding what it thinks I want to see and simply showing me that. So that's the screen I see when I search for things. So then we get the issue of no one knows what the culture is. We've never had that before. This is a whole new territory. And in some ways it's good. The reason I wanted to talk about this is I don't know, A, what we do about it, and B, whether it's good or bad. In many ways it's good. When culture was controlled by an authority, by an establishment, it excluded. It was for America, for most of the past 300-400 years, white Christian men were running 90% of the cultural institutions. They were running the museums, they were running the publishing houses, the newspapers. And then eventually white Jewish men were put into, but it was always white guys. There were very few women, there were very few people of color. This was not good. And during the late 20th century, that started to get shaken up a little, but which was an important revolution, just like the Impressionists revolutionizing with the Art Academy. And new things are being opened slowly, not enough. But the question then becomes, when you take down the authority, who becomes the authority? There's always somebody. There's always somebody deciding, what's going to be put in front of the audience. But now, that is often simply an algorithm. The algorithm's parameters, the things that the algorithm is deciding, are not known to us. We don't know what the algorithm is even looking for, but furthermore, the algorithm is very often being tailored to what will be profitable or helpful to the platform. So that therefore, for instance, the algorithm will say, we want things that lots of people click on, or we want things that give us a lot of data about the people who are watching. We don't really care what they're watching because we just want to steal their location and their address and their shopping history. And not steal. Yes, I'll say steal. So the issue then becomes, we are being shown things because the algorithm says, "Ooh, if I can get them to watch more of this, it helps my company." Now that's obviously the movie studios were helping the company. They were selling whatever sold what they thought would sell the most tickets. But what becomes difficult here is that even with the movie studios, the TV networks, even the indie companies, there was a sense of values, of choice. They were saying, well, yes, maybe public beheadings would be very popular on TV, but we don't think we're going to show that. Now, there's no real guarantee nor any, frankly, controls over what is making those decisions. What's that going to do to the art form? And one of the things that I think that does for us is it puts us in a weird position. I believe it makes it much less likely that anyone can have a career in terms of making money or even being recognized. Sorry, I got a helicopter going overhead. It's simply, although it is weirdly easier to get material out to the global audience because you now have things like YouTube, hello, or other social media sites or various places where you can set up your own website and distribute your own work as you will. And then it's a question of simply, can you get attention for it? And sometimes people can. So therefore, in many ways, technology has allowed artists a more direct route to an audience than has ever had before. But at the same time, because it is so large, it is almost impossible to be significant. It is almost impossible. Even the big companies are struggling with the fact that their bets of hundreds of millions of dollars very often fail. That even the biggest companies are struggling to gain and keep an audience. And therefore, there is nothing that a small release can do in the face of that. Nothing. And to a certain extent, that was often true in the past. The authorities, the establishment had locked everyone out. And so now, if you look at it that way, to say, well, for most people, at least we have our own small community, our niche that we can possibly reach. We can build, if you like goth clown comedies, you can set up a goth clown comedy site and produce goth clown comedy content, movies, images, whatever, and you may slowly but surely draw that community together and get an audience. But what I'm concerned about here is what it also does is it means that for the very first time, we're sort of in this chaotic moment of having millions of communities, of cultures, but no overarching culture. What does that do? What does that do to meaning? What does that do to the back and forth between artists and the audience, between artists and other artists? There simply is at once too much and not enough. And so I just been thinking a lot about this idea. Hold on, let me just quickly check in on some of the comments. Okay. One chases what's popular, and then another writes in search of lost time. One writer. Okay, got it. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Well, that's the thing. There always had been a high and low culture, pop culture and high culture. Those are kind of combined. Honestly, pop culture has sort of taken over as popular and financially successful things will do. And that's actually one of the biggest questions I have is, have we entered a point at which popularity or money have become too important, have become too valuable? Because is that the best way to decide what a culture is? Is that the best way to decide what good art is? I am hesitant to suggest that we need an establishment, we need an authority. at the same time, I'm concerned um, socially, politically, and artistically about the possibility that unchecked money and mass movements can do us real damage. So that's sort of the question I wanted to raise. Let me keep looking at some of the kind. Okay, Michael says Joker reflected mass hysteria. Joker 2 went commercial. Okay, I'm going to disagree with that. I believe that Joker 2, which I saw and which I liked, I have to say. I don't usually get into stuff about how I felt about various things, but Joker 2 is an enormous bomb, partly because it cost so much. If it had cost the same as the original, it probably would be considered much more of a success. I actually kind of like what Joker 2 did, which is Joker 2, for those of you who don't know or haven't seen it, in my opinion, Joker 2 is an assault on the popularity of Joker 1, which I think is a bold artistic move and cool as hell, frankly, that Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix said, hey, they want a sequel. We didn't want them to want a sequel. Let's put right in their face why it was wrong to want a sequel. I kind of think that's a cool move, I gotta say. I thought it was a good movie. Okay, the relationship between cultural products, movies and books, and culture in the anthropological sense, ethics, rituals, beliefs, is where it gets interesting. Yes, Ricky, you are definitely right, because isn't that the thing? Isn't our culture, our artistic culture, a major influence or part of our culture in the sense of our behavior towards others in our community, in terms of our, as Ricky just said, ethics, rituals, and beliefs of a group of people. I've been wondering about this for quite a while. I like violence in movies. I like sex in movies. I like movies to feel pretty untamed, frankly. Obviously, I don't necessarily think that should be just broadcast to anyone, anytime, but I do like that art can go there, can explore those things because they're in our world. But a thing happened in the course of the 20th century in which violence became the main driver of popular entertainment. I grew up on it. I grew up when it was just exploding in the 1960s and 70s, when a lot of the censorship came off. And frankly, I find a lot of violent movies powerful. But at the same time, in the course of that half century, at the second half of the 20th century, there has been a rise in interpersonal violence, as far as I can tell. I mean, I don't have hard statistics on that, but it does seem that people are more willing to be violent in their personal lives than they were, at least appeared to be 100 years before. Now, on the other hand, I know that in the 19-teens and 20s, the rise of gangsters, that was pretty ugly. And I am sure that life behind closed doors in many homes was violent and frightening. But I do have to say, there seems to be a certain sense of the acceptability of violence that I worry the art that I've liked fostered. I know there have been studies that say, it's obviously it's not going to make you violent. It's not like you're going to watch a violent movie and then go out and do something that is not in your heart. But what it can do is normalize. It can make acceptable behavior that really shouldn't be acceptable for public safety, for human rights. I'm not sure about that one either, but I have actually become a little less willing to go violent for kicks in artistic creation. Anyway, I don't know. These are things that are on my mind. Ming says, today is about community, marketing, and transmedia. It's more work just to enter the game, but everyone can enter. Yes, that is true. But at the same time, the scale has gotten so big that you can't win. At this point, businesses cannot compete against the giant conglomerates. Individuals certainly cannot compete, cannot change anything. That's troubling. Like, yes, it's true. When you were, if you were a painter in Paris in 1870, when the Academy was refusing to see modern art, they could simply open another gallery and get a good percentage of the audience that they needed to see their work. And they caused a stir because they were in Paris and the culture was centered in Paris at that time. And so if you could get people to walk into that gallery, you were affecting the culture. Now, if you were to open a gallery, if you were opening a website, if you were to have a movie that you self-released, you cannot get a large enough percentage of the audience to make an impact. And because the flow of content has become so overwhelming, even something that does have an impact fades away because the next wave of stimulus, the next wave of content, which is what the platforms are eager to have, the streaming services, the social media sites, the online publishers, they are all looking to give you a feed that never stops. If the feed never stops, then nothing has a real impact because it's going to get washed away by the next wave. So this is a problem. we have come to accept the idea that business values, that the values of a set of businesses are inescapable, that we cannot say, no, perhaps the best way to decide what goes on the screen, on your screen, is not simply what makes the biggest impact and gets viral. For many reasons, that may not be the thing that you want to push. But at the same time, I am loath to go back to the idea of a small establishment deciding these things. So it's tricky. We are overloaded. And furthermore, the algorithms are creating artificial waves of popularity. And I know this because I am the lucky recipient of one. You are all seeing me because the algorithm picked up one of my video interviews with Film Courage. I was running my channel for over a year, and I had 36 people subscribed. I did the interviews with Film Courage. Most of them got a moderate amount of views, 10, 12,000, something like that. One of them weirdly got 4 million. Nobody knows why, but it wasn't that different from the other ones. It isn't magic. It isn't that much better than the other stuff. What happens is when the algorithm sees that something, for whatever reason, is popular, it becomes more popular. It feeds it to more people, and so it creates a wave. Now, that initial spike, sometimes it's created by some irrelevant, not quality, not value. It could be, for whatever reason, the spike in one item will trigger the algorithm to feed it, which will cause an upward spike of more, and the more will cause the algorithm to feed to more. In other words, what's causing popularity is popularity, not quality, not value, not meaning, not anything, simply popularity, clicks, notice, attention. And so therefore, I'm concerned. That's just, honestly, that one I'm not going to call out as anything but bad. It is bad to simply operate a culture based on stimulus, based on reaction. That's not the value of the culture should not necessarily come from what gets attention. That is, the things that get attention are not inherently valuable. They're not inherently worth our time. On the other hand, we do want the audience, the reaction of the audience, to have a meaning. We want people's art should not be just, propaganda pouring ideas onto people. um, I am uncertain about this. Sorry, let me just I gotta quickly gotta quickly answer a text. Okay. Um, anyway, um, so this is let's see what you guys are saying. Um, Warhol was right. Everybody gets 5 minutes of fame. Warhol was quite right. Warhol was part of the conceptualization of making popular art and high art blend. And so yes, the 5 minutes of it was 15 when he did it, but it is down to 5. Thank you, Samuel Wagner. Okay, appreciate that. Um, okay, definitely not. I'm not sure what. Definitely not making sense. Oh, thank you, Vidit. Vidit Horo says, yeah, I think Joker Through is terrific. Um, what is really frightening is that most of our culture is cybernetic. What will be this moment of time when human culture, when the internet goes? Yes, that is the other thing. That is the other thing that is concerning me, is that because our culture, our cultural products are now only accessible through software. And the one thing we know is that's not going to last. In other words, right now, if a book was printed in 1700 and somebody finds it in the attic of a house, that book is still usually to a certain extent accessible. You can probably open it and turn the pages if you are careful. A painting that was done hundreds and hundreds of years ago is still accessible. A picture that we take, a movie that we make, a recording what I am doing right now, unless you have the software and the hardware that operates to show that thing, it's gone. And even while that began to be true with mass media in general, radio, for instance, was frighteningly evanescent. Radio would come and go unless somebody recorded it. We have no way of knowing what was on the radio. Likewise, movies and television. If you don't have a projector, you'd have to build a projector to run a silent film. We still have some of those around, but it's not like anyone can just look at a videotape from 1980 and know what's on it. That's troubling. It's troubling because the things that are holding our culture, containing our culture, could go away forever and leave this vast hole in human history. That's something that we should be thinking about. Okay, let me just do some other some checks. Some statistics indicate that our time is one of the least violent in the history of mankind. We just see more because of media. Yes, yes. This is true. Also, I don't, like in ancient Rome, were the streets as violent as we are now? Is it the technology of violence? Is it guns? Is it reporting of violence? Is that different? Human beings, by the way, I believe will always be violent. They will always be lustful. All of the sins and virtues are going to be in every human being. My question is, what is the world, the community, the culture doing to help encourage us to do the nice ones and not the mean ones? Because that's sort of part of the job of culture, to allow us to get along. A lot of these ideas are partly based in this book by Yuval Harari called *Sapiens*, which basically it offers the concept that once you get bigger than a tribe, a little cluster of people, what organizes human beings? How can human beings do things? How can we live in communities of thousands, millions? And the answer that he says is myth, is shared concepts, which is culture. It can be a religion, it can be a national ideology, it can be any number of things. But that is how we manage our behavior in mass or large situations. That certainly has been true. It is possible, and I have not read Harari's later books, which are about these questions. what happens when the the scale gets so big that even myth can't hold it together, which is where we are now. In other words, I mean, it's a fair argument to say that even large America, the United States, which was for a time somewhat held together by a mythology, a set of principles in the government. Many people were excluded from that, but at least it was working towards greater equality and inclusion. What I think is happening now, but what's happening now partly is that we've got so many people who can all be reached in many ways that no single mythology is holding. What we're having is bunches of mythology. So we have this this group of people who have different mythologies trying to live together, and it's not working well. So I am concerned personally. I'm concerned artistically without having a good answer. I just do want to say before we go too far, my personal answer to this is recognize that the times are what they are, that what we define as culture has broken down. There are many active and some of them phenomenal cultures happening, but there is no organizing culture that can reach globally. The differences between groups of people are simply too great. What I think that means is scale down. That's if I had to just have personal advice about this, my advice would be scale down. Work for your niche, your community, your cluster, your culture. Try to find a way to survive as a creative person in your cultural and reality, your financial reality, your cultural reality. We are not powerful enough to change it. Hopefully one day we will organize and create a better culture, or find a way to respect getting along with lots of cultures. Because as Haskell points out here, in 1800 you barely know what happened in the next village. Now we not only know what is happening in every part of the world, but we can get there within a few hours. We can literally I can be across the continent in 8 hours. And that's including driving time to the airport. When that happens, we are all on the same place. We're all in the same culture, in one sense. This makes me think about the success of Terrifier 3. Yeah, exactly. And I am never going to say that something that is startling or sensational or upsetting or whatever should not have a place in culture. I'm a big one for that. I like that culture allows for that. On the other hand, sometimes things are just like blah. Okay, heart frames. When the world is falling apart, why not culture? Yes, I guess we're getting back to ancient roots, smaller local communities and smaller businesses. That's what, frankly, I would hope. I would hope that there was some way to have a consciousness that we are. The thing about when there were small cultures is that they tended to think we're the ones. We're the best culture. We're the only culture. We have to defend against other cultures and either keep them away or take them over. Now, I think hopefully we're getting to a concept of we're all going to be in this bunch of many, many, many cultures, and we're going to have to find a way to live together. I know, way idealistic, but that's what I got. Aristotle, balance is key, or something like that. Thank you, Learn to Teach. Yeah, Aristotle is actually a really interesting prime example. What most of us European-based, and America is just an offshoot of European culture. I mean, we took over in the 20th century, but it's all one. Americo-European culture is a 2,000-year experiment, probably on its way out. almost definitely on its way out. But that means that in all these different countries in Europe, in all these different cultures, and then America, the initial mythology of Greek and Roman, of Judeo-Christian, those were carried by the various establishments fairly consistently for a few thousand years. So when people look at Western civilization, they see Aristotle and others as the core of it. Aristotle is almost entirely useless now. Most of what Aristotle says is not valid anymore. But we tend to say, oh, well, that's the core of our culture. We can't give that up. We can't. These ancients, these powers, must be right. And this form of what I would call fundamentalism, and I think that you can have a cultural fundamentalism as well as religious, which says these texts, these figures, this mythology is fundamental, is unchangeable, is always right. I don't buy that. I don't like it. I think it's dangerous. I think that while it may be also dangerous to tear loose your roots and not have a system, you also can't keep saying we have to do what Aristotle said or we had to do what various texts say. It's just not working anymore. Going backwards rarely is a good plan. Taking from the past and using judiciously, using wisely, using relevantly to what we also know from other sources, that seems to be that's my suggestion. Do we consume culture or does it consume us? That is actually always true. I think that's always been true. I mean, I know that when novels first started coming out, people were like, novels, they're messing with everyone's minds. They're taking over everyone's minds. They're making us into fools. So I would say, yes, we are always consuming it, and it is always consuming us, many of us at least. So yeah. And frankly, that's a good thing. It's a good thing if the culture is consuming us. But at this point, you have to say which culture and how. Alex says, a polished indie film 20 years ago would break through. Nowadays, polished indies are a dime a dozen and all drown. Yes, exactly. The number of examples of how art is no longer capable of finding a place are simply overwhelming. Film courage brought me here. I'm glad. Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Many of us begin by, perhaps, consuming art that captures our attention. But with consumption, we then seek out more valuable art. Now this is a tricky thing. Is it more valuable? Yes, I would agree that we all begin by consuming art that captures our attention, but more connects to us in some deep way. And different people will get different things. There's no end of stories about, in the rock and roll generation, when the people first heard Elvis, when somebody first heard jazz, when somebody first saw their first movie, and it affected them. They may have had music before. They may have had cultural experiences. They may have watched cartoons on TV, and then movies for some reason had a bigger effect. Everyone's got certain things that the way that they are shaped, both biologically and socially, we have different things that we connect to. And when we connect to them, we get consumed by that. And when we get consumed by it, we explore it, we arrange our lives around it. I don't know that that's always more or less valuable. For many decades, people would have said comic book art was not valuable. And now it's very valuable. And I would argue, although it is financially valuable, it's also artistically valuable. So tricky stuff. In a world based on arbitrary paradigm of hierarchy, value systems aren't based on integrity or ethics, but on the dominant themes considered valuable at the time, which societies based on momentum become shallow and fast. This is somewhat true, but I don't know. I don't know that I want to just trash commerce. I don't know that I want to trash capitalism, although capitalism unchecked is definitely a bad idea. Because there was a time when people said, I don't care what the audience wants. If they don't want what we think is beautiful, then they are scum. That's not good. We need to have some sense of the value of people's reactions. And very often a system, a cultural system is based on power. In other words, one group, for whatever reason, but usually through force, has power. And their values, which are a mixture of actual values and also practical considerations, needing to keep things as they are or make things as they want them to be, that becomes good. I'm not sure that we want that to be allowed purely by power. There was a time mankind could only speak of things. They didn't suffer from a lack of culture. We just don't know about it because they had one and it was passed on. Yes, no, certainly that is very true. I am not. There was a prehistoric, pre-verbal, pre-writing, pre-capturing of images human culture. That's absolutely true. The interesting thing is, I do believe that these artistic forms, these technologies, painting on cave walls, writing things down instead of memorizing them and reciting them, they affected the values. They affected the art form, and they affected the way people think because they were exciting. They are inherently meaningful, inherently exciting to people. And so we tend to find ways to make music or dance. We tend to find ways to make images. I think that those things are part of whatever this is up here in our human brains. What holds a culture? The word is narratives. To a certain extent, yes, but that's not holding true anymore, which means either it's simply not possible to have a culture this large and this fast, or I don't know. I don't know that there is going to be a narrative that is going to make everyone on the internet go, oh yeah, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to see. That's what I believe in. I'm not sure that that's going to happen. For the earth to unite, all people need to speak the same language. So they can, yes, exactly. That's another thing. As the Tower of Babel brings up, and there have been many efforts in the past to create a universal language, and it never works. And I don't know why. And maybe it will happen. I don't know. I'm concerned about scale. I'm concerned that things can't or shouldn't operate on mass and mass plus scale, on a global scale. Should we all speak the same language? If we all had the same language and therefore all had the same system, would we have a global government? And would that be a good thing? It makes me uneasy. The Americas, not just the US, culturally, are an extension of European culture. Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Alexander the Great tried to preserve culture. Yes, of course, lots of people have tried to preserve culture. His unfortunately caught fire. Haskell points out that sometimes it helps not being able to understand everything that's being said to you. Rowan Atkinson, interesting, wanted to reach a universal audience, so he invested into slapstick. Yes, this is actually interesting because, yes, silent film was in some ways much more global than sound film. Because they could simply cut titles in whatever language they wanted, cut them in. Yuji says, I tend to think something, aka truth, is always right. However, each age, country, group of people should apply it. Can be drastically different. This is my problem. I agree with you, but I am also recognizing that may be wishful thinking. For instance, I believe that that everyone should be treated equally. They should be that there should be a kindness and a nurturing behavior from all people to all people, and that if we organized ourselves by that instead of by competition, it would be better for everyone, and that is the basic good. My problem is there are other people who make an argument that that's not possible or natural, and that in fact power is good. That the problem isn't that there shouldn't be, one force that's dominating others. The problem is that they just want to be the one that's dominating. I can't argue entirely that they're wrong, as evidenced by the fact that as long as you have everyone being nice, if one person is not nice, they have the potential to do things that the other people can't stop them from doing. So therefore we get into, well, are we going to give some group, police, for instance, or the military, power to fight on behalf of the group? It's tricky and way beyond screenwriting, frankly. Aren't all cultures represented on the internet, each one separately? Yes, this is the glory and the problem of digital technology. In theory, every subgroup on Earth has a place in the digital universe. The issue is if there are all these different groups, but one is larger, or if there are all these different groups, but the larger one is taking money from the others. There isn't the internet is not being run democratically. The internet is not being run equally or equitable. The internet is being run by companies which have, first and foremost, self-preservation and self-promotion as their guiding principle, which is understandable because they don't want to be destroyed. But on the other hand, that means that they are not necessarily saying, oh, this would be better for the world, so I'm going to limit my profits. That's where we run into problem. Should there be a global, neutral internet? Maybe. Is this perhaps a public resource that should not be a for-profit item? I got a strong preference for that. Scale. So you would say keep some sort of balance. I would say recognize the balance. But by balance I do not mean equal. I mean recognize the pull of contrary or conflicting situations or needs. That's what balance is to me. Balance is not equality or evenness or centeredness. Balance is recognizing that the interplay between different forces or elements is built into the situation, and you can't get rid of one. So those are my thoughts. Are we going into a global culture and then to the stars, a solar system culture? I don't know. I don't think so. We don't seem to be doing well, even with our global culture. We don't seem to be doing well with our, with the uses of our technology. We have not done well with them. And in my lifetime, I don't know that we're going to. So I just want I want to bring this back to creative writing, to creative art, which is to say the point about this is to recognize that almost all of the creative art that we have consumed in our lives were created in a different world. They were created in subcultures, some of which were called Western civilization, but that doesn't matter. It's still a subculture. It's still a little cult. And all of those things determined the artistic values of the art. And what I'm saying is we are entering a new time in which all of those rules, all of those values, all of those subcultures have been wiped out, and what is taken their place is a digital corporate sphere in which we are operating. And while we may treasure the subcultures that existed before us, they're gone. And the new one is weird. And I just feel like we have to be alert to the fact that something changed in the past 20, 25 years with the rise of digital culture that is equally or possibly never before experienced by humanity. Possibly maybe the Industrial Revolution, possibly printing. I'm not sure, but I'm saying whatever it is, what we're going through now is that big, and if we are in fact in the course of the rise and fall of empires at the feet of this new thing, it behooves us to be somewhat aware of it, although to a certain extent to also say there's also nothing I can do. If you lived in some town in the Roman Empire and the Roman Empire fell, you weren't going to stop it. So anyway, that's it. That's what is on my mind. Big questions, no one answer. The brain workout. Yes, exactly. Thanks everyone for the brain workout. Thank you, Ricky, for saying that. That's where we are. That's what's going on. Is I just want to raise the question of figuring out what culture you are working in and what the realistic potential is and value is of doing that. Not to say don't do it. In fact, I say do it. Just don't think that that is going to make you win in the global tech culture, because it's not. There's not, so far nobody's winning but the owners of the property. Everyone else is just content for them. And I'm seeing that, and I'm not sure what we do about it, but it does change the game. So my main point here is the game is changing. The art that you are working in, whatever art it is changing because of the control of the culture. And I personally suggest that you adjust your scale accordingly so that you can survive and do your work, because that's really the most important thing, is that you survive and do your work. And with that, the other way to say that would be to say, go write something.